The year is roughly 28,000 BCE. Give or take a millennium or two. You are crouching on the damp, packed earth floor of a rock shelter, your hands raw and stained green, endlessly twisting a pile of soggy weeds against your bare thigh. Outside, the world is a terrifying expanse of ice sheets and megafauna that view you as a bite-sized snack. But inside, you are engaged in the most revolutionary act of your species. You are making string. You are about to invent the technology that will eventually lead to the internet, suspension bridges, and that sweater you got for Christmas. But right now, it mostly just feels like you are giving yourself a friction burn. You are the architect of the string revolution, a technological leap that, statistically speaking, you probably won't survive long enough to enjoy, because a cave bear is currently sniffing around the entrance to your studio. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing the map fill up. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You look down at the pile of vegetation next to you. It's stinging nettle, Urtica dialca, or perhaps wild flax. You harvested it days ago, braving the stingers that inject histamine into your skin, leaving you with itchy welts that are driving you slowly mad. But you didn't just pick it, you processed it. You let it rot. This is called retting, a polite term for leaving plant matter in a stagnant pool of water until the slimy, pectin-rich gums dissolving the fibers break down. The smell is distinctive. It smells like a swamp that has given up on life. But this decay is necessary to separate the long, strong bast fibers from the woody core of the stem. You pick up a bundle of these wet, grayish fibers. They feel slimy and cold. You separate a few strands, teasing them out with your fingernails, which are caked with mud. You lay them across your thigh. With the palm of your hand, you roll them down toward your knee. Friction catches the fibers, twisting them tightly in one direction, let's say clockwise or an S twist. Then, you fold the twisted strand in half and let it twist back on itself in the opposite direction. A Z twist. It locks. You pull on it. It doesn't break. You have just created a ply. You have turned a fragile, useless weed into a cord that can hold weight. It is a moment of pure magic. But the process is agonizingly slow. To make enough string for a simple carrying net, you have to sit here for weeks. To make enough for a garment? Years. This is the time trap of the Neolithic. You are investing thousands of hours of labor into something that will eventually rot away, leaving almost no trace for future archaeologists. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. Historians often call this invisible era the String Revolution. While we have thousands of stone arrowheads and flint scrapers because stones don't decay, the vast majority of human technology from this period was fiber-based nets, snares, baby slings, bags. We know they existed because we find their ghosts' impressions of woven mats left in baked clay or the occasional miraculously preserved fragment in a bog. But the actual tools of your trade are biodegradable. You are the invisible engineer of the Stone Age. As you twist, you realize your thigh is getting sore. In fact, you are slowly depilating your leg. Here is a quirky tidbit for you. Anthropologists have observed that in modern cultures that still practice thigh spinning, the women, and it is usually women, often have one leg that is hairless and slightly calloused from years of rolling hemp or agave fibers. It's an occupational hazard. In your case, it's just another indignity to add to the cave bear situation. But this friction is the engine of civilization. Without this twisted cord, you cannot make a bowstring. Without a bowstring, you cannot hunt efficiently. Without a net, you cannot catch fish in bulk. This string is more important than fire, but nobody writes songs about the person who sat in the back of the cave twisting weeds. You finish a length of cord and wind it into a ball. It's lumpy and uneven, but it's yours. But there has to be a better way. Your hand cramps. You look at a stick lying on the ground. You look at a lump of clay or a heavy stone with a hole in it. You slide the stick through the hole in the stone. You tie your fiber to the stick. You give it a flick. The stone acts as a flywheel. It spins the stick. Kinetic energy takes over. Instead of rolling the fiber on your leg, the spinning stick twists the fiber for you. You just have to draft the fibers out, feeding the hungry, spinning maw of the tool. You have just invented the drop spindle. This is the first complex machine. It uses rotational inertia. The weight, the whirl, keeps the momentum going, twisting the thread faster and more evenly than your palm ever could. Whir. The spindle dances in the air, suspended by the very thread it is creating. It is hypnotic. You watch the whirl blur. The chaotic pile of flax is transformed into a uniform line of order. Historians still argue whether the invention of string and weaving actually predates the development of complex language. The syntax of weaving over, under if this then that, the recursion of patterns is remarkably similar to the syntax of grammar. Some cognitive scientists suggest that the brain power required to keep track of thousands of threads might have been the gym that built the muscles for complex speech. Did we learn to speak so we could tell each other how to weave? Or did we weave because our brains were finally wired for structure? You drop the spindle again. It spins. Hum. The vibration travels up the thread to your fingertips. You are no longer just a person in a cave. You are a manufacturer. You are creating a surplus. But what do you do with all this thread? You can only make so many snares. You look at the pile of spun yarn, scratchy, beige, and smelling a swamp, and you wonder if you could make something bigger, something flat, something that could replace the stiff, heavy animal hides that you currently wear. Hides that get hard as wood when they dry and rot when they get wet. You want something flexible. You hammer 2 stakes into the ground. You tie a thread between them, then another, and another. You have created a warp, the foundation. Now you take a ball of your string and pass it over and under, across the warp. This is the weft. You are weaving. It is tedious work. You are essentially doing binary code with your fingers. 1, 0, 1, 0. Over, under. But slowly, a fabric emerges. It is rough. It is open weave. It looks like a burlap sack that has seen better days. But it breathes. It drapes. You sit back, your back aching against the cold stone wall. You have moved from twisting to spinning to interlacing. You have created a textile. The word comes from the Latin texere, to weave, but also to build or construct. You are building a second skin. The sun begins to set outside the cave, casting long shadows across your primitive loom. The fire crackles, sending smoke up toward the soot-stained ceiling. You wrap your new creation around your shoulders. It's scratchy, but it traps a layer of warm air next to your skin. You don't know it yet, but you have just started an industry that will dominate the global economy for the next 30,000 years. Wars will be fought over what you are doing. Empires will rise on the back of the cotton and silk that will replace your nettles. Children will be employed in deafening factories to do what you are doing with your fingers. But for now, it is just you, the drop spindle, and the quiet satisfaction of imposing order on the chaos of nature, one twist at a time. You step out of the damp cave and into the blinding golden light of the Mediterranean. The air has changed. The smell of rotting nettle swamp is gone, replaced by the scent of wild thyme, dried earth, and the faint, greasy aroma of raw wool. You have fast-forwarded a few thousand years. You are now in a sun-drenched courtyard in ancient Greece, or perhaps a windy settlement in Iron Age Scandinavia. The geography doesn't matter as much as the architecture, because you are standing in front of the first great machine of the textile age, the warp-weighted loom. You look at this contraption. It doesn't look like the craft store looms you might have seen on Pinterest. It looks like a door frame that has lost its door. Two heavy wooden beams stand upright, leaning slightly back against a wall, or the roof eaves. A third beam connects them at the top. But where is the bottom bar? There isn't one. Instead, the vertical threads the warp hang down from the top beam like a curtain of hair. And at the bottom of each bundle of threads, dangling just above the dirt floor, are stones. Or more likely, shaped lumps of clay. These are loom weights. You reach out and touch one. It feels cool and dusty. It's shaped like a pyramid or a donut with a hole punched through the top. These weights are the engine of this machine. They use gravity to keep the tension high. If you want to tighten the threads, you don't turn a screw. You just find a heavier rock. It is primitive, yes, but it is also genius. The tension is live. If the humidity changes and the wool stretches, the rock sinks lower, keeping the tension perfect. The loom adjusts itself. You start to work. And work is the operative word here. Weaving on a warp-weighted loom is not a sedentary activity where you sit on a bench and listen to a podcast. You are standing up. You are walking back and forth. You are dancing with the machine. You hold the shuttle, a simple stick with the weft thread wrapped around it. You walk the width of the loom, passing the shuttle through the gap between the front and back threads, the shed. Then you grab a sword beater, literally a piece of wood shaped like a sword, and you beat the weft thread upward. Yes, upward. On this loom, you weave against gravity. You are pushing the fabric up toward the top beam, fighting the weight of the stones. It is a shoulder workout that would make a modern gym rat weep. Thwack, thwack. The sound of the wooden sword hitting the tightly packed wool echoes off the stone walls. But the real soundtrack of your day is the clink, clink, clink of the clay weights hitting each other as you move the threads. It sounds like a nervous wind chime. It is the background noise of antiquity. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The warp-weighted loom was the standard weaving technology in Europe for nearly 4,000 years. It appears on Greek vases, in Homer's Odyssey, and in archaeological digs from Troy to Iceland. It was so ubiquitous that when the Greeks imagined the fates spinning the destiny of mankind, they didn't imagine a mystical energy field. They imagined 3 women working a vertical loom, cutting the thread when your time was up. As you weave, you are wrestling with wool. This isn't the sanitized, chemically treated merino you buy today. This is in the grease. It is full of lanolin, the natural oil sheep produced to waterproof themselves. Your hands are coated in it. It smells distinctly barnyard-esque, a mix of wet dog and old socks. But the lanolin is a blessing. It keeps your skin soft and acts as a lubricant for the rough fibers as they slide past each other. You are making a pepless, a simple tubular garment that requires no tailoring, just a really big piece of rectangular cloth. But don't let the simplicity fool you. The patterns you can create here are complex. By grouping the weights differently, you can create twills, herringbones, and diamond patterns. You are programming the fabric with rocks. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists love loom weights. Why? Because looms are made of wood, and wood rots. Fabric decomposes, but fired clay lasts forever. When an ancient house burned down, which happened a lot, the loom would burn, the threads would snap, and the line of clay weights would fall to the floor in a perfect row. When archaeologists dig them up thousands of years later, they find a ghost loom, a line of donuts in the dirt that tells them exactly where the machine stood and how wide the cloth was. It is a fossil of labor. But let's talk about the social aspect. You are likely not alone in this courtyard. In the Greek world, weaving was the definitive task of the gynecium, the women's quarters. It was a communal activity. You are working alongside your sisters, your mother, and the enslaved women of the household. Historians still argue about the nature of this space. Was the gynecium a prison of domestic drudgery, where women were locked away to produce textiles for the household economy? Or was it a sanctuary of female power and socialization, a place where women could talk, sing, and tell stories away from the prying eyes of men? The loom weights clinking might have masked the sound of seditious gossip or the transmission of oral history. Consider the myth of Philomela, who had her tongue cut out so she couldn't report a crime against her, so she wove the story into a tapestry instead. The loom was a voice for the voiceless. Or consider Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, who spent 10 years weaving a shroud by day and unpicking it by night to delay her suitors. The warp-weighted loom is perfect for this trickery, because the weights keep the tension constant. Unweaving is just as easy as weaving. You just pull the thread out, and the weights settle back down. The sun is high now. The shadows of the warped threads cast a barcode pattern across your face. Your shoulders are burning. You have walked maybe 3 miles today, just moving back and forth in front of this frame. You reach for the heddle rod. This is a stick that lifts the rear threads to create the gap for your shuttle. You pull it forward. The weights swing. Clatter. You pass the weft. You drop the rod. Thud. You beat the fabric up. Thwack. It is a hypnotic, full-body rhythm. You are not just making cloth. You are keeping the world warm. In a time before central heating, insulation was life. The heavy woolen cloaks, the blankets, the wall hangings, they are the only things standing between your family and hypothermia. You are an insulation engineer. As the afternoon wears on, you notice a flaw in the yarn, a thick slub where the spinner, maybe you, from the cave era, got lazy. You pause. In the world of the warp-weighted loom, there is no control-Z. If you make a mistake, you either live with it or you unpick hours of work. You decide to leave it. The Greeks have a concept of hubris excessive pride. Only the gods are perfect. If you make a perfect cloth, you might offend Athena, the goddess of weaving. And remember what happened to Arachne? She wove too well, insulted the gods with her skill, and got turned into a spider. Best to leave a little lumpy bit, just to be safe. The sun dips below the roofline. The light turns golden, then gray. You can't weave in the dark. Oil lamps are expensive, and a fire hazard near all this dry wool. You tie off the shuttle. You look at the fell line, the edge of the fabric you have created today. It is maybe 3 inches of cloth. 3 inches for a day of standing, walking, and beating. You untie the weights to release the tension for the night, so the wool doesn't stretch out. You stack the clay donuts in a pile. The clink-clink stops. The courtyard falls silent. The machine is resting. You wipe the lanolin from your hands onto your skirt. Your fingertips are raw, your back aches, and you smell like a sheep. But you have added another row to the infinite grid of civilization. The stone weights sit in the dust, waiting for gravity to wake them up again tomorrow. The cool, clinking shade of the Greek courtyard dissolves into a wall of blinding white heat. The air is no longer scented with thyme and sheep fat. It smells of wet earth, river weeds, and the distinct sulphurous tang of fertile mud baking in the sun. You are standing shin-deep in the Nile River. The water is brown and sluggish, swirling around your ankles, while the mud, the legendary, life-giving silt of Egypt, squelches between your toes like warm chocolate pudding. You are here to harvest the foundation of the pharaonic wardrobe, flax. You look out at the field. It is a sea of delicate, pale blue flowers bobbing on slender green stalks. Linum usitatissim. It looks fragile, almost decorative, but inside those stalks are the toughest fibers in the ancient world. You reach down to grab a handful. Your instinct, honed by modern agriculture, is to cut it with a sickle. Stop. Put the knife away. If you cut flax, you ruin it. The sap dries out and stains the fiber, and you lose the precious few inches of length at the root. To get the linen that wraps a king, you have to pull it out of the ground, root and all. You bend over, grab a bundle near the base, and heave. The soil makes a wet sucking sound as the plant comes free. You do this again, and again, and again, until your back feels like it has been trampled by a chariot. You are entering the linen cycle, a process so labor-intensive it makes the wool work look like a vacation. Once you have a pile of muddy stalks, you have to ripple them, comb off the seed heads, retting them. Yes, rotting them in water again. A smell of progress is apparently always decomposition. Breaking them, scutching them, beating the woody core out, and finally hackling them. Hackling is the part that feels most like torture. You pull the fibers through a bed of sharp spikes, a bed of nails, essentially, to split and straighten them. The result is a pile of glossy, gray-blonde hair that feels cool to the touch. It is tow and line. The rough stuff becomes rope or tunic cloth for the pyramid builders. The fine stuff becomes royal linen. Now you move from the field to the loom. But forget the upright, gravity-fed loom of the Greeks. In ancient Egypt, you don't fight gravity. You surrender to it. You walk to a shaded spot, perhaps under a palm frond shelter. The loom is staked directly into the ground. It is a ground loom. 2 beams are pegged into the dirt, holding the warp threads under high tension, hovering just inches above the sand. To work this machine, you don't stand. You don't sit on a bench. You crouch, or you squat. Or, if you are particularly unfortunate, you crawl. You kneel in the dust, leaning over the threads. Your knees are screaming. Your lower back is locked in a permanent curve. You are weaving horizontally, passing a shuttle through the shed while trying not to drip sweat onto the pristine white yarn. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Egyptian linen was graded by quality, and the highest grade was known as royal linen or byssus. It was woven so finely that it was literally transparent. We're talking about thread counts that rival modern high-end percale sheets, sometimes exceeding 200 threads per inch, using nothing but hand-spun yarn and a loom staked into the dirt. In frescoes, Egyptian nobles are often depicted wearing intricate pleated dresses that show every contour of their bodies underneath. This wasn't artistic license. It was a flex. It was woven air, a fabric so expensive it proved you didn't need to do manual labor because you'd tear it if you moved too fast. As you weave, you are obsessed with one color, white. In a world of dust, sand, and mud, whiteness is godliness. It is purity, but flax is naturally gray or brown. To get that blinding white, the cloth has to be bleached. You watch the laundry workers nearby. They aren't using Clorox. They are using the sun and a substance called natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture harvested from dry lake beds. They soak the cloth, rub it with natron, and lay it out in the baking sun for weeks. The UV rays slowly oxidize the color away. It is a chemical process powered by a star. But let's talk about those pleats. You've seen the statues, the pharaohs with their stiff, triangular kilts that stick out perfectly. How did they do that before the invention of synthetic polyester or spray starch? This brings us to a quirky tidbit. Experimental archaeologists believe the secret to the eternal Egyptian pleat was likely a sizing agent made from egg whites or animal glue. The laundry workers would fold the damp linen into complex accordion ridges, press it between grooved wooden boards, paint it with this protein goo, and let it bake dry. The result was a garment that was stiff as a board and held its shape until you sweated too much or it rained, at which point your majestic kilt would collapse into a soggy diaper. Fashion has always been pain. You finish a row of weaving. You pick up the beater, a heavy piece of wood, and slam the weft thread home. The sound is duller here. Thump, thump. It is absorbed by the ground. Historians still argue about the gender roles of this specific loom. In the Old Kingdom, depictions almost exclusively show women weaving. By the New Kingdom, after the introduction of the vertical loom, imported from the Hyksos invaders, men start appearing in the weaving workshops. Was there a technological takeover? Did weaving become a state industry, run by men once the technology shifted? Or do the tomb paintings just reflect a change in artistic convention? Either way, as you kneel in the dirt, your knees don't care about the gender politics. They just hurt. But there is a spiritual dimension to your work. You aren't just weaving clothes for the living. You are weaving for the dead. Linen is the fabric of eternity. When a body is mummified, it requires hundreds of yards of linen strips. The bandages aren't just for wrapping. They are structural. They hold the body together when the moisture is gone. Often, the linen used for mummies was recycled old bedsheets and tunics that had served the living or torn up to protect the dead. It's the ultimate sustainable textile loop. You look at the piece you are working on. It is a selvage the finished edge of the cloth. Egyptian weavers were obsessed with selvages. They often wove fringe or loops directly into the edge so the fabric wouldn't unravel. It's a detail that takes twice as long, but ensures the garment lasts for centuries. The sun begins to dip low over the western desert, the land of the dead. The heat finally breaks, replaced by a breeze coming off the Nile. You stand up, your joints popping loudly in the quiet evening air. You brush the sand off your knees. You look at the finished cloth. It is cool to the touch, smoother than cotton, heavier than silk. It has a crispness to it, a snap. In the dying light, it glows with a pale, ghostly luminescence. You have taken the mud of the river, the sweat of your brow, and the salt of the earth, and you have transmuted it into something pure. You walk down to the riverbank to wash the dust from your feet. The water is cool now. The same river that fed the flax stalks is now soothing the weaver. You watch a felucca boat drift by, its sail made of the very same linen you just wove, catching the wind and pushing it against the current. You are the engine of this civilization, too. Without you, the pharaoh is naked, the mummy rots, and the boat doesn't sail. Not bad for a day spent crawling in the dirt. The dry, baking heat of the Egyptian sun vanishes, replaced instantly by a thick, humid warmth that clings to your skin like a damp towel. The air here is heavy, white with steam, and carries a smell that is distinctive. It doesn't smell like the river mud or the sheep fat of your previous lives. It smells like wet hair, boiled cabbage, and something faintly nutty. You are standing in a dimly lit wooden hut in ancient China, hovering over a cauldron of boiling water. And you are about to perform the most delicate, gruesome, and lucrative task in the history of textiles. You are making silk. You look down into the bubbling water. Bobbing on the surface are dozens of small, white, fuzzy ovals. They look like oversized peanuts or cotton balls. These are the cocoons of Bombyx mori, the domestic silk moth. Inside each one is a pupa, a caterpillar, in the middle of its magical transformation into a moth. But you are not here to witness the miracle of nature. You are here to interrupt it. If the moth wakes up and chews its way out of the cocoon, it cuts the thread. A cut thread is useless to you. You need the thread whole. So you have thrown the living cocoons into the boiling water. The heat kills the pupa instantly, sorry, little guy, and dissolves the sericin, the natural gum that holds the cocoon together. It is a grim, pragmatic business. You pick up a bamboo whisk or a pair of chopsticks. You gently brush the surface of the bobbing cocoons. You are looking for the leading end. It's a game of microscopic fishing. Suddenly, a chaotic tangle of floss catches on your brush. You lift it up. Here is the magic. You tease out a single strand. It is so fine, it is almost invisible to the naked eye. It catches the light from the window, shimmering like a spiderweb. You pull, and pull, and pull. Unlike the short, curly fibers of wool or the stiff stalks of flax, silk is a filament. It is one continuous strand. Here is a mainstream historical fact. A single silk cocoon is made of one unbroken thread that can measure anywhere from 600 to 900 meters long. That's nearly a kilometer, or over half a mile. If you are lucky and have a particularly healthy worm, it can reach up to 1,500 meters. You are unspooling a mile of protein from a house the size of your thumb. It is nature's 3D printing, and you are hitting the undo button. But a single strand is too thin to weave. It would snap if you looked at it wrong. So you grab the leading ends of 5, maybe 8 cocoons at once. You guide them through a small eyelet, perhaps a jade ring or a copper hook. As they pass through, the softened gum makes them stick together, fusing into a single, usable thread of raw silk. You begin to wind this thread onto a reel. Swish, swish, swish. The cocoons bob and dance in the water, spinning wildly as they unravel. It looks like a synchronized swimming routine performed by marshmallows. You have to keep the water hot. Your fingers are turning pink and pruny from the steam and the constant dipping. The smell of the cooking insects is overwhelming. Which brings us to a quirky tidbit. What do you do with the boiled pupae once the silk is gone? You don't throw them away. In a subsistence economy, protein is protein. A boiled silkworm pupa now, stripped of its fancy coat, is a snack. It's crunchy on the outside, if fried later, or soft and bursting with savory juices if eaten straight from the pot. It is the original byproduct of the fashion industry. You might pop one in your mouth as you work, just to keep your energy up. It tastes like chicken, if the chicken had lived its entire life eating nothing but mulberry leaves. You focus back on the reel. The thread is moving fast. If a cocoon runs out, the spent pupa sinking to the bottom of the pot, like a stone, you have to be quick. You must grab a fresh filament from a new cocoon and slap it onto the moving thread. The natural gum acts as glue, splicing it in instantly. You are a human sensor, detecting the thickness of the thread with your fingertips, keeping it even. If you fail, the silk will be lumpy. Lumpy silk is for peasants. Smooth silk is for the emperor. And make no mistake, this is a state secret. You are working in the epicenter of the world's first industrial monopoly. For centuries, the Chinese dynasties guarded the secret of sericulture with a paranoia that makes modern tech companies look open source. The penalty for smuggling silkworm eggs or mulberry seeds out of China was death. Not a fine, not a slap on the wrist execution. The empire knew that if the Romans or the Persians figured out that this shimmering fabric came from a worm and not a tree, as the Romans hilariously believed for a long time, the trade balance would collapse. Historians and mythologists still argue about the origin story of this process. The most famous legend tells of the Empress Lizu, or Shi Ling Shi, who was sitting under a mulberry tree drinking tea when a cocoon fell into her hot cup. As she tried to fish it out, the heat unraveled the thread, and voila, the silk industry was born. Archaeologists, however, are the buzzkills of history. They point to evidence of sericulture that predates the legendary empress by thousands of years. Half-cut cocoons found in Neolithic sites, suggesting people were harvesting silk long before teacups were a standard accessory. It's likely that silk was discovered by someone like you, a regular person trying to eat a bug who realized the wrapper was more valuable than the candy. The reel is full now, a gleaming skein of raw silk, glowing with a pearlescent sheen. It is stronger than steel by weight. It takes dye with a brilliance that wool and linen can only dream of. It feels cool in summer and warm in winter. It is the perfect material, but your hands are wrecked. The hot water has scalded your fingertips. The Saracen gum has dried on your skin, making your hands feel tight and glazed, like a donut. You take the skein off the reel. It is heavy. To make just one silk robe, you will need to boil and unravel about 2,500 cocoons. That is 2,500 lives extinguished, 2,500 kilometers of thread reeled by hand, and countless hours of standing over a steaming pot. You hang the silk up to dry. The strands catch the light, creating a prism of color in the dim hut. It is mesmerizing. You touch it. It is soft, the softest thing you have ever felt. You wipe your sticky hands on your rough hemp apron. The contrast is stark. You are wearing a sack, but you are manufacturing clouds. You look at the pile of naked, boiled pupae in the bowl next to you. Lunchtime. You pop one in your mouth, chew thoughtfully, and turn back to the pot. The water is bubbling. The next batch awaits. The emperor needs new clothes, and the worms aren't going to boil themselves. The steam of the silk hut dissipates, carried away by a wind so cold and sharp it feels like it has been honed on a whetstone. The humidity drops to near zero. You take a breath, and your lungs protest. The air is thin here, lacking the oxygen density you are used to. You are no longer in the river valleys of the old world. You are standing, or rather sitting on the roof of the new world. You are in the high Andes, perhaps overlooking the sacred valley of the Incas or the shores of Lake Titicaca. The landscape is a stark, terrifyingly beautiful canvas of brown earth, yellow ichu grass, and white-capped peaks that scrape the dark blue sky. And you are about to become a machine. In the previous eras, you operated a loom. You stood in front of a frame, or you knelt over stakes in the ground. Here, the distinction between weaver and loom vanishes. You are the frame. You are the tension. You strap a wide, woven belt around your lower back. It connects to the cloth beam resting in your lap. The other end of the loom, the warp beam, is tied to a small tree, a post of your house, or perhaps just a stake driven into the hard Andean earth. Between you and that tree stretch hundreds of colorful threads. To tighten the warp, you lean back. Your body weight pulls the threads taut. To loosen it, you lean forward. You are breathing life into the machine with every shift of your hips. If you sneeze, the tension jumps. If you get up to chase a wayward alpaca, the loom collapses into a pile of string. You are literally tethered to your work. This is the backstrap loom. It is the ultimate nomadic technology. It fits in a bag. You can weave while watching the herds, while cooking, or while gossiping with your neighbors. But don't let the portability fool you. The cloth produced here is some of the most complex in human history. You look at the fiber in your hands. It isn't the lanolin-greased sheep's wool of Greece or the slippery filament of China. It is alpaca, or perhaps the coarser llama wool for a carrying sack. If you are royalty, which, given your track record of labor, you probably aren't, it might be vicuna, the finest, softest fiber in the world, sheared from wild camelids that are caught and released once every few years. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The Inca Empire, Tawantinsuyu, was likely the only major civilization in history to define wealth primarily through textiles rather than precious metals. Gold and silver were pretty, sure, the sweat of the sun and tears of the moon, but they were ritualistic. Cloth was currency. The army was paid in cloth. The emperor, the Sapa Inca, wore a tunic of the finest campi cloth once, then burned it so no mere mortal could ever wear it again. When the Spanish arrived, they were confused why the Inca storehouses were filled not with gold bars, but with millions of perfectly folded tunics. You pick up your tool. It isn't a shuttle. It's a bone. Specifically, it is a Huichuga-pointed tool made from the leg bone of a llama or alpaca, polished smooth by generations of grease and friction. You use it to pick up specific warp threads and to beat the weft down. Tap dash tap tap. The sound is dull and percussive, like a woodpecker inside a duvet. The weaving here is warp-faced. In the European looms, the weft, the side-to-side thread, and the warp, the up-and-down thread, usually share the visual load. Here, you pack the warp threads so tightly together that the weft disappears completely inside the fabric. All the color, all the pattern, comes from the vertical threads you set up days ago. This means you are doing complex mathematics in your head. You have to lift the red thread, drop the yellow thread, twist the green thread. You are running a binary algorithm of incredible complexity without a written pattern. This brings us to a scholarly debate that still rages quietly in university basements. Did the Inca have writing? The traditional answer is no. They had no script, but they had tokapu squares of geometric patterns woven into the tunics of the elite. Some researchers argue that these aren't just pretty shapes. They are a logographic language, a textile script that we have simply forgotten how to read. You might be weaving a poem, a law, or a genealogy right now, and to the untrained eye, it just looks like a checkerboard. As you lean back, the strap digs into your kidneys. The weaver's back is a real condition here, but the tension control you have is unparalleled. By shifting your weight just a millimeter, you can adjust for a thin spot in the yarn or a knot. You can feel the fabric growing out of your waist. And the colors. You aren't working with drab beige. You are working with a technicolor explosion. The red comes from cochineal, a tiny parasite that lives on cactus paddles. You crush the dried bugs. Yes, more bugs. The textile industry is surprisingly insect-heavy. To get a carmine red so vibrant, it will eventually become the most expensive dye in Europe. The yellow comes from the cauliflower, the blue from indigo. You pause to adjust the shed rod, a thick piece of bamboo that holds the basic opening in the threads. The wind whips around you, chilling your ears, but the work keeps you warm. The focus required is total. If you drop a thread here, you can't just fudge it. The structure of the cloth will fail. Here is a quirky tidbit. Because the backstrap loom is limited by the reach of the weaver's arms, the fabric created is almost always narrow, usually about the width of a human body. To make a large blanket or a poncho, you have to weave 2 long strips and sew them together. This seam is often disguised with intricate embroidery, turning a limitation of the machine into a feature of the fashion. The width of the cloth is literally the measure of the weaver. You watch a herd of alpacas grazing nearby. They look at you with that distinct camelid expression of mild judgment. They provided the raw material, but you are providing the order. The sun begins to dip behind the peaks, casting the valley into a deep purple shadow. The temperature plummets instantly. This is the danger of the high altitude. The moment the sun goes away, the freeze sets in. You weave faster, your bone tool flying, trying to finish a row before your fingers get too stiff to manipulate the threads. You are creating something that is virtually indestructible. Andean textiles found in desert graves from 2,000 years ago are often in better condition than the bodies they wrapped. The tight, warp-faced weave protects the inner structure from dust and light. You are weaving a time capsule. Finally, you can't see the threads anymore. You lean forward, releasing the tension. The loom goes slack, collapsing into a soft jumble in your lap. You untie the strap from your waist. The pressure releases, blood rushing back into your lower back. You stand up, stretching your spine against the cold mountain air. You roll up the loom warp, cloth, bone tool, and all into a bundle, no bigger than a yoga mat. You can carry it home, throw it in a corner, or take it on a 3-day trek across the empire. It is the first mobile workstation. You walk back toward your stone hut, the bundle tucked under your arm. The wind is howling now, but you aren't worried. You have a tunic made of 3 layers of tight woven alpaca wool. It's windproof, waterproof, and warmer than anything the Europeans are currently wearing in their drafty castles. You might not have the wheel, and you might not have iron, but in the technology of warmth, you are light years ahead of the rest of the world. You leave the biting wind of the Andes behind, but you don't find relief in a warm, fragrant meadow. Instead, you step into a damp, stone-walled shed in medieval England, perhaps Yorkshire or the Cotswolds. The year is roughly 1300. The air here is thick, humid, and carries a scent that makes the Egyptian flax wedding pit smell like a perfumery. It is the unmistakable, eye-watering stench of stale urine. Welcome to the fulling mill. Or, more accurately, the walk mill. You are standing barefoot in a large wooden trough or a clay-lined pit. You are not alone. You are standing next to 2 or 3 other people, all of you trudging rhythmically in a slurry of warm water, grayish clay, and human waste. You are a walker. This isn't just a surname. It is a job description. You look down at your feet. They are buried in a thick, sodden mass of woolen cloth. This is web, raw fabric that has just come off the loom. But right now, it is useless. It is loose, greasy, and full of gaps. If you held it up to the light, you'd see a grid of tiny holes where the warp and weft intersect. If you made a cloak out of it now, the wind would blow right through it. Your job is to beat the living daylights out of this fabric until it shrinks. You lift your leg, squelch. You stomp down, splash. You are essentially a human washing machine on the agitate cycle. The goal is twofold: scouring and thickening. First, the scouring. Remember that sheep grease, lanolin, that made your hands soft in the Greek courtyard? Well, now it's a problem. It makes the wool slippery and smelly. To get it out, you need a strong alkali to turn the grease into soap, a process called saponification. In a world before chemical factories, the cheapest, most abundant source of ammonia is stale urine. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. In medieval cities, urine was a commodity. Households would collect their chamber lye in pots. It was often taxed or sold to the fullers. There were even specific vessels for collection placed on street corners, the ancestors of the public urinal, but designed for harvesting rather than disposal. The Romans famously had a tax on it. Pecunia non olet, money does not stink, and the medieval textile industry kept the tradition alive. You are literally marching in the liquid assets of the town. As you stomp, the ammonia breaks down the grease. The dirt floats away. But the second thing happening is even more magical. Wool fibers have microscopic scales, like pine cones. When you add heat, moisture, and friction, your feet, those scales open up and lock together. The fibers tangle. The fabric shrinks. This is felting or fulling. The cloth can shrink by up to 50% in width. The loose, open weave tightens into a dense, solid mat. The individual threads disappear. The fabric becomes windproof and waterproof. It transforms from a rag to broadcloth. You stomp. Left, right, left, right. It is exhausting work. Your legs burn. The fumes make your eyes water. But there is a rhythm to it. You and your fellow walkers might sing a work song to keep the pace. The beat has to be consistent. If you stomp too hard in one spot, the cloth will be uneven. Here is a mainstream historical fact. This process is the origin of several common English surnames. If your last name is Walker, Fuller, or Tucker, your ancestors were likely the people standing in this vat. Walker was the term in the north of England, Fuller in the southeast, and Tucker in the West Country. You are walking in the footsteps of a genealogical giant. But you aren't just using urine. You might also be using fuller's earth, a type of clay rich in magnesium oxide that absorbs oil. It feels gritty between your toes, acting as an abrasive to scour the wool. It's a spa treatment for the fabric, but a torture session for your feet. Historians still argue about the exact timeline of the transition from foot fulling to mechanical fulling. We know that fulling mills, where water wheels drove heavy wooden hammers to pound the cloth, existed as early as the 12th century. This was arguably the first true industrial revolution in textiles, centuries before the spinning jenny. But foot fulling persisted for high-quality cloth long after the machines arrived, because the hammers could be too rough and damage the fabric. The human touch, or foot, was the premium option. You pause to turn the cloth. It is heavy, sodden, and hot. You have to fold it carefully to ensure every inch gets equal attention. The steam rises off the vat, curling around the wooden beams of the roof. Once the stomping is done, the cloth is rinsed in a clear stream, thank goodness, and then stretched out to dry. But you can't just throw it over a bush. It has shrunk, remember? You need to stretch it back to a uniform width. You take the wet cloth to a field filled with wooden frames called tenters. These frames have rows of sharp, hooked nails, tenterhooks. You hook the selvage of the cloth onto the nails and crank the frame open, stretching the fabric tight. This is where the phrase "on tenterhooks" comes from. It means to be in a state of painful suspense, stretched thin, waiting for the result. As you hook the cloth, you hope you haven't overshrunk it. If it tears on the hooks, days of weaving and hours of stomping are ruined. But the finishing isn't over yet. The cloth is now a dense felted mat, but it's hairy. It looks like a fuzzy animal. To make it smooth and expensive, you need to raise the nap. You pick up a strange tool. It looks like a wooden cross set with the dried heads of a specific plant, the fuller's teasel, Dipsacus sativus. This plant is nature's Velcro. The dried flower heads are covered in stiff, hooked spines. You brush the teasels gently over the surface of the dry cloth. The hooks catch the loose fiber ends and pull them up, creating a soft, fuzzy surface. Why use a plant? Why not a metal brush? Because metal is unforgiving. If a metal hook catches a snag in the weave, it will rip a hole in the fabric. If a teasel hook catches a snag, the plant breaks, saving the expensive cloth. It is a fail-safe engineered by botany. To this day, some high-end billiard cloth manufacturers and luxury woolen mills still use real teasels because no plastic substitute is quite as gentle. You brush the cloth until it is fuzzy. Then you take huge, terrifyingly sharp shears, so big you have to rest one handle on a table and use your body. Wait to close them, and you shave the fuzz off. This leaves a perfectly smooth, flat surface. The broadcloth is now ready to become a nobleman's cloak or a monk's habit. You step out of the vat, your legs stained and smelling distinctly unholy. You wash your feet in the river, scrubbing away the clay and the ammonia. The cold water is a shock, but a welcome one. You look at the field of tenters, rows of cloth drying in the pale English sun. They look like sails for land ships. You have taken the raw, greasy output of the loom and beaten it into civilization. The weave is gone, hidden inside the felt. You have made the chaotic threads into a solid wall of color. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the drying fields. The smell of the fulling mill lingers in your nose, a constant reminder of the chemistry of cleaning. You are tired. Your feet are pruny. But as you wrap your own fulled cloak around your shoulders, you feel its density. The wind hits it and stops. The damp air tries to penetrate and fails. It is a fortress of wool, built by feet and urine. And tonight, as the temperature drops, that smell is a small price to pay for warmth. You leave the reeking, steam-filled fulling mill and ascend the social ladder literally and architecturally. You are now climbing a spiral stone staircase in a medieval castle, perhaps in France or Flanders, the epicenter of the tapestry world. The year is somewhere in the 14th or 15th century. You step into the great hall or a high-ceilinged solar. It is magnificent. It is grand. It is also absolutely freezing. You might think that because you are indoors, you are warm. You would be wrong. A stone castle is essentially a giant refrigerator designed to keep people out, which incidentally keeps the heat out too. The fireplace is roaring at one end of the room, but 5 feet away, the air is cold enough to see your breath. The stone walls radiate a chill that seems to suck the heat right out of your marrow. This is why you are here. You are not just an artist. You are an HVAC engineer. You are weaving the insulation. You stand before a massive loom. This isn't the floor loom of the cottage weaver. This is a high warp loom, Oatlease. It stands vertical, like a wall of harp strings, reaching 12 or 15 feet into the air. Behind the strings sits a large painting called a cartoon, a full-scale guide for the image you are about to create. Your job is to translate that painting into wool and silk, pixel by pixel. You sit on a bench behind the loom. Yes, behind it. You are working on the wrong side of the tapestry. You look through the warped threads to see the cartoon, and you use a small mirror hanging in front of the loom to check your progress on the right side. It is a mental gymnastics routine that would break a lesser brain. You are weaving a mirror image of a mirror image. You pick up a bobbin of colored wool. You pass it over and under the warped threads, covering them completely. Unlike the cloth you wove before, where the warp and weft shared the load, here the weft, the colored wool, completely hides the warp, the structural linen, or heavy wool. This is weft-faced weaving on steroids. You press the wool down with a heavy comb or your fingernails. Tap, tap, tap. You have completed a space about the size of a fingernail. It took you 10 minutes. Here is a mainstream historical fact. A skilled tapestry weaver could produce roughly 1 square meter of coarse tapestry in a month. For high-quality, fine work with silk and gold thread, maybe half a square meter. A single large wall hanging could take a team of 5 weavers a year to finish. A full set like the famous Lady and the Unicorn, or The Hunt of the Unicorn, represented a decade of labor. When a king bought a tapestry, he wasn't just buying art. He was buying the crystallized time of a small village. But why go to all this trouble? Because of the drafts. When you hang a thick, heavy woolen tapestry on a stone wall, you create an air gap. The air trapped between the fabric and the cold stone acts as an insulator. The tapestry itself radiates the warmth it absorbs from the room back at you. A room with tapestries is habitable. A room without them is a meat locker. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. Tapestries were not wallpaper. They were furniture. They were designed to be moved. When a noble family traveled from one castle to another, which they did constantly, partly to escape their own sewage, they took the tapestries with them. The walls were left bare. A castle without its lord was a skeleton. The tapestries were rolled up, thrown onto wagons, and rattled across muddy roads to the next residence. This is why many old tapestries have wear marks on the edges, not from hanging, but from being packed. As you weave, you are telling a story. It might be a biblical scene, a mythological hunt, or a battle. You are the propagandist of the medieval world. If the Duke wants to look heroic, you weave him a little taller. If he wants his enemy to look foolish, you weave him with a slightly smaller horse. You are Photoshop with a bobbin. Historians and art experts still argue about the classification of the most famous tapestry of all, the Bayeux tapestry. You know, the 1 to 70-meter long linen strip depicting the Norman conquest of 1066. The debate is a bit pedantic, but fierce. Is it a tapestry? Technically, no. A tapestry is woven on a loom where the design is built into the fabric itself. The Bayeux tapestry is embroidery-colored wool stitched onto an existing piece of linen cloth. It was made with a needle, not a shuttle. So calling it a tapestry is a lie, but the Bayeux embroidery just doesn't have the same ring to it. You switch bobbins. You are now using silk. Silk adds a sheen that catches the candlelight, making the figures seem to glow. If the patron is really rich, you might use gold-wrapped thread. This is tricky stuff. Metal thread is stiff and unforgiving. It cuts your fingers, but the effect is dazzling. In a dim room lit by flickering torches, a tapestry with gold thread basically acts like a primitive cinema screen, shimmering and moving with the light. The silence of the room is heavy. You hear the crackle of the fire, too far away to warm you, and the scratching of the other weavers next to you. You are a team. One person does the trees. Another does the intricate folds of the velvet robes. The master weaver does the faces. You pause to look at the back of your work. It is a mess. There are loose ends hanging everywhere, knots and long floats of thread carried from one area to another. It looks like a chaotic explosion of yarn. But turn it around, or look in your mirror, and it is a perfect, orderly image. It is a metaphor for history itself. Messy and chaotic on the inside, but presented as a smooth, coherent narrative to the public. The smell of the wool is different here. It has been dyed with expensive materials, madder root for red, woad for blue, weld for yellow. The dye house smells of vinegar and mordants, chemicals that fix the dye. The wool is clean, not greasy. It feels dry and rasping against your skin. You are creating a verdure tapestry, a scene filled with green foliage. Why green? Because it brings the outside in. In the dead of winter, when the world is gray and brown, the Lord can sit in his solar surrounded by eternal spring. You are weaving a garden that never dies. But there is a technical challenge here. Hatching. In painting, you can mix blue and yellow to get green. In weaving, you have blue thread and yellow thread. You can't mix them. So to create shading or a third color, you have to weave alternating lines of blue and yellow, like the teeth of a comb interlocking. From a distance, the eye blends them. You are essentially doing pointillism centuries before Syrah. Your fingers are nimble, moving faster than the eye can follow. Pick, pass, beat. Pick, pass, beat. You are in a trance. The image grows agonizingly slowly. A leaf takes an afternoon. A hand takes 2 days. A face takes a week. You realize that this tapestry will likely outlive you. It will outlive the Duke. It might even outlive the castle. Wool, if kept dry and away from moths, is incredibly durable. You are weaving for posterity. As the light fades, the cartoon behind the strings becomes hard to see. You can't light a candle too close one spark, and years of work go up in flames. So the workday is dictated by the sun. In winter, your hours are short. In summer, you weave until your eyes burn. You tie off a thread. You stand up and stretch. Your lower back pops. You walk around to the front of the loom to inspect your day's work. There, amidst the forest of wool, is a small rabbit peering out from behind a woven bush. You made that rabbit. It wasn't there this morning. It will now sit there, frozen in wool for 500 years, watching the feasts, the arguments, and the slow decay of the dynasty you serve. You wrap your arms around yourself to ward off the chill. The stone walls are cold, but the rabbit looks warm. And that, really, is the whole point. You descend from the high, drafty perch of the tapestry loom, but your feet do not touch the ground for long. In fact, you are about to climb even higher. You are leaving the slow, meditative world of the pictorial artist and entering the frantic, sweaty, and mechanically complex world of the pattern weaver. The year is perhaps 1600, or maybe 1700. The location is a cramped workshop in Lyon, France, or perhaps Spitalfields in London. The air is filled with a fine, glittering dust that catches in your throat. It is silk dust. You approach a monstrous wooden structure that fills the entire room. It looks like a 4-poster bed that has been assimilated by a giant spider. It is a loom, yes, but it is a draw loom. And your place is not on the bench in front of it. You climb a ladder to the top of the machine. You settle yourself on a narrow wooden plank, or a precarious perch built into the frame, 6 or 8 feet above the floor. You are now the draw boy. Even if you are a grown man or a woman, the title sticks. You are the ghost in the machine. You are the human central processing unit of a computer made of wood and string. Below you sits the weaver. He is the operator. He holds the shuttle, but he is powerless without you. He cannot create the intricate flowers, the damask swirls, or the brocade velvet that the aristocracy demands. His loom only has 2 or 4 shafts enough for simple plain weave or twill. But the pattern requires hundreds of different shed openings. It requires you. You look at the terrifying array of cords hanging in front of you. This is the figure harness. Here is how it works. The warp threads, thousands of them, are threaded through mail, little metal or glass eyes, attached to vertical cords called simples. These simples go up through a comer board, a holy board that keeps them organized. and are attached to a series of horizontal cords called lashes. The lashes are the program. Someone, a master designer, has already tied loops of string around specific groups of symbols. These loops encode the pattern. If you pull loop number 1, it pulls a specific set of vertical cords, which lifts a specific set of warp threads. The weaver shouts, "Pull," or in French, "Therese." You grab the handle or the toggle attached to the first set of lashes. You lean back. You use your entire body weight. Heave. Below you, thousands of silk threads rise up like a ghostly wave. The weaver throws his shuttle through the opening. Clack. He beats the cloth. Thud. Release. You let go. Gravity takes over. Heavy lead weights called lings hanging at the bottom of the cords pull the threads back down. Clatter. Pull. You grab the next handle. Heave. You are doing this all day. You are lifting hundreds of pounds of lead, one pull at a time. Your back aches. Your hands are calloused. You are covered in sweat, which is problematic because if a drop of sweat falls onto the expensive silk below, you will be fired, beaten, or both. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The draw loom is one of the most important and least understood machines in history. It allowed for the mass production of complex patterned textiles, brocades, damasks, and lampas that were previously impossible or incredibly slow to make. Before the draw loom, a weaver had to manually pick up threads with a stick. With the draw loom, the pattern was stored in the tied lashes. Once the loom was set up, which could take weeks, you could weave the same complex flower pattern over and over again, just by pulling the handles in order. It was the first read-only memory ROM storage device. But let's talk about the physical toll. You are a biological actuator. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. Drawboys often suffered from specific occupational deformities. Because they were constantly leaning back and pulling heavy weights with their arms raised, they developed enlarged chest muscles, stooped shoulders, and often a characteristic shuffling gait from sitting in a cramped position for 12 hours a day. In some weaving districts, you could identify a drawboy just by walking behind him on the street. He looked like he was permanently bracing for a heavy wind. The relationship between you and the weaver is intimate and strained. He is the master. He gets paid for the cloth. You are the boy. You get paid a pittance. But he cannot weave a single inch without you. You have to be in perfect sync. If you pull too slow, he loses his rhythm. If you pull the wrong handle, the pattern is ruined. It is a duet. Pull, clack, thud, release, pull, clack, thud, release. The noise in the workshop is deafening, but it isn't the mechanical roar of the future. It is the organic roar of wood hitting wood, leather straps creaking, and heavy lead weights crashing down. It is a percussive symphony. You look down through the forest of cords. You can see the top of the weaver's head. You can see the fabric growing a miraculous field of silver lily on a crimson background. It looks like magic, but you know the truth. It is just math and muscle. Historians still argue about the precise origins of the draw loom. Did it originate in ancient China and travel along the Silk Road? Or did it develop independently in Syria or Persia? Hence Damask from Damascus. The linguistic clues are messy. The evidence is scarce because looms are made of wood and rot away. But most agree that by the Middle Ages, the technology had converged. The figure harness changed the world because it democratized luxury. Suddenly, a merchant's wife could wear a patterned silk dress that previously only a queen could afford. You are hot. Heat rises, and you are stuck in the rafters. The air is thick with the smell of the oil used to lubricate the loom parts and the sour breath of the weaver below. You take a sip of water from a jug you brought up with you. You have to be careful not to spill. The complexity of the pattern is mind-boggling. A single repeat of the pattern might require you to pull 400 different handles in a specific sequence. If you lose your place, You have to shout down to the weaver, stop the loom, unpick the last few shots, and figure out where you are. It's a syntax error. You are effectively the first user of a computer program. The designer wrote the code, tied the lashes. The loom is the hardware. You are the power supply and the execution command. As the afternoon drags on, the light in the workshop changes. The simples cast long spiderweb shadows across the walls. Your arms are trembling. The lead weights feel heavier with every pull. This is the drawboy's curse, the fatigue that sets in just when the light is failing and mistakes are most likely. But there is a strange pride in it. You are the keeper of the pattern. The weaver just throws the shuttle back and forth. A monkey could do that. You are the one making the flowers bloom. You are the one deciding that this thread goes up and that thread stays down. You are the intelligence in the system. Finally, the weaver shouts, "Cut or finish." He cuts the cloth from the beam. The tension releases. The loom gives a groan as the wood settles. You climb down the ladder, your legs stiff and shaky. You hit the floor, and for a moment, the world feels strange because it isn't moving. You look at the finished cloth. It is a masterpiece. The light catches the satin weave, making the pattern disappear and reappear as you move the fabric. It is changeable silk. It is worth more than your entire family will earn in a lifetime. You rub your aching shoulder. You know that tomorrow you have to do it all over again. But you also know that change is coming. There are rumors of new inventions. Men are trying to figure out how to replace the boy on the roof. They want to make a machine that pulls its own cords. They want to automate the suffering. You walk out into the cool evening air of Lyon or Spitalfields. The streets are paved with cobblestones that look like the weave of a plain cloth. You are just a thread in the great urban fabric. But unlike the threads on the loom, you can walk away, at least until the whistle blows in the morning. You descend from the cramped, gusty rafters of the draw loom and step into a different kind of workspace. You are in a weaver's cottage in Lancashire, England. The year is 1733, or perhaps a few years later as the news travels. The air here is cooler, smelling of rain and wet wool, but the atmosphere inside is tense. You are looking at a standard broadloom, but someone has hacked it. For centuries, the rhythm of weaving was dictated by the length of the human arm. If you wanted to weave a piece of cloth wider than your wingspan, say, a broadcloth, for a coat or a sail, you couldn't do it alone. You physically couldn't throw the shuttle through the shed and catch it on the other side without falling off the bench. So, you had to hire a helper. You sat on one side, your buddy sat on the other, and you played a game of catch with the shuttle. Throw, catch, beat, throw, catch, beat. It was slow. It was social. It was the way things were done. But John Kay, a man with a mind for mechanics and a disregard for tradition, has changed the game. You sit down at this modified loom. There is a new wooden track running along the bottom of the reed, the comb that beats the cloth. This is the raceboard. At each end of the raceboard, there is a little wooden box. And connecting these boxes to a handle in the center of the loom is a system of cords and a peg. You hold the handle of the picking stick in one hand. You don't touch the shuttle. The shuttle is hiding in one of the boxes. You give the handle a sharp, rhythmic jerk. Flick inside the box. A block of wood or leather, the picker, strikes the pointed end of the shuttle like a billiard cue hitting a ball. The shuttle shoots out of the box, flies across the raceboard, through the shed of warp threads, and lands safely in the box on the other side. Zoom clack, you didn't have to reach. You didn't have to lean. You certainly didn't need a buddy. You just twitched your wrist. You beat the cloth with your other hand. Thud, you flick the handle the other way. Zoom clack, this is the flying shuttle. It doesn't look like much, just a boat-shaped piece of wood with metal tips. It is the first true disruption of the textile industry. It moves faster than the eye can follow. If you blink, you miss it. The shuttle is no longer an extension of your hand. It is a projectile. The rhythm of the room changes instantly. The slow, conversational throw catch is replaced by a frantic, mechanical clack, clack, clack. You are weaving twice as fast. You are weaving broadcloth alone. You have just doubled your productivity and fired your assistant. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The invention of the flying shuttle created an immediate industrial crisis known as the yarn famine. Before this, it took about 4 spinners, usually women working on spinning wheels in their homes, to keep one weaver, usually a man, supplied with yarn. The ratio was balanced. But with the flying shuttle, a weaver could consume the output of 8, 10, maybe 12 spinners. The spinners couldn't keep up. The price of yarn skyrocketed. Weavers were sitting idle, waiting for their wives and daughters to spin faster. This bottleneck is exactly what forced the invention of the spinning jenny and the water frame decades later. John Kay broke the supply chain. But while you are enjoying the speed, you notice a danger. The shuttle is moving fast, really fast. If it jumps the track, which it often does, it becomes a missile. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. The flying shuttle was notoriously dangerous. It had metal tips. If the timing was off or a thread snapped, the shuttle could fly out of the loom and hit the weaver. Weaver's eye became a grim occupational hazard blindness caused by a rogue shuttle striking the face. You are essentially working in front of a firing squad that shoots every 2 seconds. As you settle into this new, jagged rhythm, you might feel a sense of power. You are a one-man factory. But outside the cottage, the mood is not so celebratory. John Kay did not get rich. In fact, he was nearly killed. The weavers of Colchester and Barry didn't see a labor-saving device. They saw a wage-cutting device. If one man can do the work of 2, what happens to the second man? They rioted. They smashed the machines. They broke into Kay's house. Legend says he had to be smuggled out of his own home in a wool sheet, ironic, to escape the mob. He fled to France, hoping for better luck, but died in poverty. You are using a tool bought with the ruin of its inventor. Historians still argue about the precise impact of the flying shuttle on the quality of the cloth. Some economic historians argue it was a pure efficiency gain with no downside. But textile experts point out that the violent force of the picker put enormous stress on the weft yarn. You couldn't use soft, delicate yarns with a flying shuttle. They would snap. So the industry had to shift toward stronger, harder twisted yarns to survive the violence of the machine. The tool shaped the material. You pull the cord again. Snap. The shuttle flies. You are weaving a piece of fustian or heavy cotton. The physical sensation is different from the draw loom or the warp-weighted loom. There, you felt the resistance of the weight. Here, you feel the snap of the spring. It is a sharper, more aggressive motion. You are not coaxing the thread. You are firing it. The noise is also different. It is a high-pitched clatter. It is the sound of the pre-industrial world cracking open. You look at the pile of finished cloth growing on the beam. It is growing faster than ever before. But you also look at the empty basket of yarn next to you. You have used up a week's worth of spinning in 2 days. You shout to the women in the other room, your wife, your daughters, perhaps a neighbor you've hired, more yarn. I need more yarn. They are spinning as fast as they can. The great wheel hums. The distaff wobbles. But human fingers can only draft fiber so fast. You are waiting on them. The machine is hungry. This is the moment the balance tips. The flying shuttle has exposed the weakness of the human hand. The hand spinners are the bottleneck now, and history does not tolerate bottlenecks for long. Somewhere in a nearby village, a man named James Hargreaves is about to knock over a spinning wheel and get an idea that will end the cottage industry forever. But for now, you just sit there, flicking your wrist, waiting for the yarn that never comes fast enough. The shuttle sits in its box, quivering, waiting to fly. You have sped up the heartbeat of the world, and the world is struggling to catch its breath. The clattering frenzy of the flying shuttle in the English countryside fades, replaced by a rhythmic mechanical clicking in a workshop in Lyon, France. The year is 1804. You are standing in front of a loom that looks like it has been possessed by a player piano. Gone is the sweaty, hunchbacked drawboy perched in the rafters. Gone is the shouting match between the weaver and his human helper. Instead, atop this loom sits a tall wooden box filled with spring-loaded needles and metal hooks. And feeding into this box is not a human hand, but a continuous chain of stiff, rectangular cardboard cards laced together with string. You are witnessing the birth of software. You step closer to inspect the cards. They are punched with rows of holes. To the uninitiated, it looks like a random scattering of voids. But you know better. You know that a hole means yes and a solid space means no. Here is how it works. You, the weaver, press a single treadle with your foot. Click. A wooden prism at the top of the loom rotates, presenting a new card to a battery of spring-loaded needles. The needles press against the card. If a needle meets a hole, it passes through. Yes, the hook connected to that needle grabs a cord, lifting a specific warp thread. If a needle meets solid cardboard, it is pushed back. No, the hook misses the cord and the thread stays down. Click-clack, you throw the shuttle. Thud, you beat the cloth. You release the treadle. The prism rotates. The next card snaps into place. Click, a new set of needles goes through. A new set of threads lifts. You are weaving a portrait of a flower, then a bird, then a complex geometric border, all without ever touching a warped thread with your hands. You are simply powering the engine that reads the code. The pattern is no longer in your head or in the muscle memory of a boy. It is stored on the cards. This is the Jacquard mechanism. It is named after Joseph Marie Jacquard, a man who, like many inventors, was really just a brilliant synthesizer of other people's failed attempts. But he made it work. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The Jacquard loom is the direct ancestor of the modern computer. The system of whole versus. No hole is binary code. 0 and 1, on and off, open and closed. Decades later, Charles Babbage would use this exact punch card system to design his analytical engine, the first mechanical computer, and Herman Hollerith would use it to tally the 1890 U.S. Census, eventually founding a company called IBM. The screen you are watching this video on is essentially a very fast, very complex loom, weaving light instead of thread. All because a Frenchman got tired of tying knots. But let's look at the software. The deck of cards for a single intricate design, say. A silk brocade table runner can be thousands of cards long. It coils into a bin behind the loom or hangs from the ceiling like a giant rectangular snake. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. One of the most famous demonstrations of this technology was a woven portrait of Jacquard himself. It was done in black and white silk and was so fine that it looked like a line engraving or a photograph. It required 24,000 punch cards. When Charles Babbage showed this portrait to the Duke of Wellington, the Duke couldn't believe it was woven until he saw the back. Babbage used this picture woven from numbers to explain to Ada Lovelace, the world's first programmer, how his calculator would work. She famously remarked, "The analytical engine weaves algebraic patterns just as the Jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves. As you weave, the sound is mesmerizing. Click, swish, thud. Click, dash, swish, dash, thud. It is the sound of automation. The physical labor of the drawboy, the heaving of lead weights has been replaced by the intellectual labor of the card puncher. Somewhere in a separate room, a designer is translating an artist's sketch into a grid. Then, a puncher, often a woman, uses a specialized keyboard to punch the holes into the cards. If she makes a mistake, punches a hole where there shouldn't be one, she puts a piece of cardboard back in, or patches the bug. This is literal debugging. You are operating a machine that separates the design of the cloth from the manufacture of the cloth. Before this, the weaver was often the designer. Now, you are just the operator. You could be illiterate, unskilled, and completely devoid of artistic talent. Yet you can produce a masterpiece simply by pressing a treadle. This shift does not go unnoticed. Historians still argue about the extent of the jacquard riots. We know that the silk weavers of Lyon, the Kennets, were not thrilled about this machine. They saw it as a threat to their specialized skills. Why pay a master weaver when a low-wage worker can run a jacquard loom? There were protests. Machines were smashed in the Place des Terreaux. Jacquard himself was allegedly assaulted and burned in effigy. Some scholars argue that the riots were less about the technology itself and more about the changing pricing structure of silk. But the result was the same. The machine won. You look at the card mechanism. It is elegant, but it is fragile. The cards get wet, they tear, they wear out. If the string lacing them together breaks, the pattern is lost, and you have a pile of shuffled data on the floor. But the precision. You look at the cloth growing on the beam. It is a damask of incredible complexity. The curves are smooth, stepped, like pixels, but so fine the eye blends them. The repeatability is perfect. Every rose is identical to the last rose. You are witnessing the death of the unique. In the hand-weaving era, every piece of cloth had slight variations, the signature of the human hand. Now, you can mass-produce perfection. The wealthy can no longer claim their clothes are one of a kind. The air in the workshop is filled with the smell of machine oil. The jacquard mechanism has hundreds of moving parts, springs, cylinders, pivots, and they all need lubrication. The loom is no longer a wooden frame. It is a precision instrument. You pause to change the shuttle. You look up at the cards. They hang there, silent and heavy with information. You realize that you are looking at the first hard drive. It stores memory. It is a physical manifestation of thought. And just like modern software, it is proprietary. The card sets are valuable. Manufacturers steal them from each other. Industrial espionage is born. If you can get your hands on a deck of cards for the latest Parisian fashion, you can clone it in a week. You press the treadle again. Click. The needle finds a hole. The hook lifts. The thread rises. It is a simple mechanical action, but it represents a profound philosophical shift. You are no longer manipulating matter directly. You are manipulating information about matter. The sun sets over Lyon. The clicking stops. You step away from the loom, your leg tired from the treadle, your ears ringing from the repetitive snap of the cards. You walk out into a world that is still largely powered by horses and wind. But inside that workshop, the digital age has already begun. You just didn't call it that yet. You called it figured silk. The clicking of the jacquard cards fades into a heavy, suffocating silence. It is midnight. The year is 1811, or perhaps early 1812. You are standing in a narrow, fog-choked alley in Nottinghamshire, or the West Riding of Yorkshire. The air is damp, and smells of coal smoke and fear. You are not alone. Around you are men with blackened faces, smeared with soot or grease to hide their identities. Some carry pikes, some carry pistols. But you carry the heavy instrument of your new trade, a massive sledgehammer. You are a Luddite. Now, pause. Forget everything you think you know about that word. In modern parlance, a Luddite is someone who can't figure out how to use a smartphone or hates technology. But you are not anti-technology. You are a technologist. You are a highly skilled weaver, a cropper, or a framework knitter. You have spent your entire life mastering the complex machinery of the textile trade. You don't hate machines. You hate these machines. Specifically, the wide frames and the shearing frames. Why? Because the owners of the factories are using these new, wider machines to produce garbage. Instead of knitting high-quality stockings in one piece, They are knitting huge sheets of cheap, flimsy fabric, cutting them up with scissors, and sewing them into the shape of a stocking. These cut-ups fall apart after a few wears. They are flooding the market, driving the price of your quality work into the ground, and starving your children. You are not fighting against progress. You are fighting against the fraudulent and deceitful manner of production. You are the first ethical consumer movement, but armed with hammers. You signal to the men. You move toward the mill or the large workshop. The owner, a man named Horseful or Cartwright, has likely barricaded the doors. He might even have soldiers inside. The British government has currently deployed more troops to the north of England to fight you than they have deployed to the Iberian Peninsula to fight Napoleon. That is how much you terrify them. You reach the door. It is locked. You raise your hammer. It has a name. You call it Great Enoch. Here is a quirky tidbit. The sledgehammers used by the Luddites were made by a local blacksmith named Enoch Taylor. Ironically, Enoch Taylor also made the shearing frames and the wide looms that you are about to destroy. The hammer and the machine share the same father. The leaded chant goes, Enoch made them, and Enoch shall break them. It is a poetic, heavy metal kind of justice. Crash. The door splinters. You pour inside. The noise is deafening. Men are shouting orders in the name of General Ned Luth. Who is Ned Luth? He doesn't exist. He is a mythical figure, a folklore ghost based on a feeble-minded boy who supposedly smashed a knitting frame in a fit of rage years ago. He is your Robin Hood. He signs the threatening letters you send to the mill owners. He is the shadow commander of the army of redressers. You find the machines. They are rows of wide knitting frames or automated shearing frames. They look like skeletons in the moonlight. You swing Enoch. Clang. Crunch. Cast iron is brittle. If you hit it hard enough in the right spot, it shatters. You are breaking the shears that replace the croppers, the men with the giant scissors from the fulling mill. A single shearing frame does the work of 4 skilled men. That's 4 families starving, so one mill owner can buy a nicer carriage. The destruction is systematic. You aren't just thrashing wildly. You are disabling the capital equipment of the enemy. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The Luddite movement was so effective and so widespread that in 1812, Parliament passed the Frame-Breaking Act. It made the destruction of a machine punishable by death. Lord Byron, the famous poet, stood up in the House of Lords and gave a passionate speech defending you, mocking the government for valuing a knitting frame more than a human life. Are there not capital punishments sufficient in your statutes? He asked. It didn't matter. The bill passed. You are now risking the gallows with every swing of the hammer. Suddenly, a shot rings out. The mill owner is firing from an upper window. Or maybe it's the militia. Panic. The air fills with smoke. You hear the cry of a comrade falling. This isn't a protest anymore. It's a war. The Battle of Burton's Mill, or the attack on Rawfold's Mill, are actual military engagements. You retreat. You slip back into the fog, leaving behind a pile of twisted metal and wood. You wash the soot from your face in a freezing stream. You go home to your hungry family and pretend you were asleep all night. Historians still argue about the true nature of Luddism. Was it a backward-looking, futile rage against the inevitable tide of industrialization? Or was it a sophisticated, proto-union labor movement that simply lacked the legal framework to negotiate? Most modern historians lean toward the latter. The Luddites wanted collective bargaining by riot. They were willing to accept machinery if the profits were shared and the quality was maintained. They were fighting for a regulated market, not a Stone Age one. But the tragedy is, you lose. The soldiers come. The trials are swift. The gallows at York are busy. General Luth is silenced not by a better argument, but by the sheer force of the state and the relentless economics of the Industrial Revolution. The wide frames are repaired. The shearing frames are reinstalled. The price of stockings drops, and the quality drops with it. You look at your hands. They are calloused from the loom and bruised from the hammer. You are a skilled artisan in a world that no longer values skill. It only values volume. The era of the craftsman is ending. The era of the operative is beginning. You wipe the grease from your brow. The sun is coming up over the smokestacks at Manchester and Leeds. The fog lifts, revealing a landscape changed forever. The cottages are emptying. The factories are filling. And the sound of the sledgehammer is replaced by a new, louder sound, a rhythmic, deafening roar that shakes the ground itself. The steam engine has arrived, and it doesn't care about your hammer. The fog of the Luddite rebellion lifts, but the air does not clear. Instead, it thickens with coal smoke and cotton dust. You are no longer in a drafty cottage or a foggy alley. You are standing in the middle of a vast, single-story brick building in Lancashire, England, or perhaps Lowell, Massachusetts. The year is 1850. Above you, a maze of leather belts and spinning steel shafts obscures the ceiling. Around you, extending in every direction like a mechanical cornfield, are hundreds of cast-iron machines. And then the whistle blows. The main drive shaft engages. The leather belts slap against the pulleys. And suddenly, the world screams. You are in a power loom shed. The noise is not just loud. It is physical. It hits you in the chest. It vibrates your teeth. It is a cacophony of clack, 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 bang, repeated 1,000 times a second. There are no earplugs. There is no OSHA. There is only the roar. You are a weaver in name only. You are really a machine minder. You watch 4, maybe 6, of these iron beasts at once. Your job is not to throw the shuttle. The steam engine does that now, slamming it back and forth with a violence that makes John Kay's flying shuttle look like a gentle toss. Your job is to fix them when they break, and they break constantly. A thread snaps. A shuttle flies out. A bobbin runs empty. When a bobbin empties, you have to replace it. Fast. The loom doesn't want to stop. You grab a fresh cop, a conical ball of weft yarn, and jam it onto the shuttle tongue. But you need to thread the yarn through the tiny eye of the shuttle. You can't do it with your fingers. It's too small, and your hands are greasy. So you put your mouth on the shuttle. You place your lips over the eye of the shuttle, the same shuttle that has been rattling around in a greasy, dusty machine for hours, and you suck. A sharp intake of breath pulls the thread through. You spit out a bit of cotton dust and oil, slam the shuttle back in, and restart the loom. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. This practice was literally called kissing the shuttle. It was the standard way to thread a loom for nearly a century. It was also a massive public health disaster. If one weaver had tuberculosis, which, given the damp, dusty air, many did, and they kissed the shuttle before passing it to the next shift or a neighbor, they spread the disease instantly. It wasn't until the early 20th century that self-threading shuttles were mandated by law to stop the spread of consumption. You are literally swapping spit with the industrial complex. The noise makes speech impossible. If you scream at the girl next to you, she won't hear a thing. So you develop a new language. You watch her lips. She exaggerates her movements. Mouth open wide, tongue exaggerated. She is using Mimo. This is the secret sign language of the textile mills. It's a combination of lip reading and hand gestures used to gossip, flirt, or warn of the overseer's approach across the deafening shed. Going to the dance tonight? Watch out, the tackler is coming. It is a language born of necessity, evolved in a high-decibel environment. You are mouthing words that no one can hear, yet everyone understands. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The transition to power looms changed the gender demographics of weaving yet again. In the hand loom days, weaving was often a man's trade due to the physical strength needed to beat the cloth on wide looms. But the power loom did the heavy lifting. The mill owners realized they could hire women and girls for half the wages of a man. The mill girl became the new face of the industry. It was one of the first times in history that young women had independent disposable income, leading to profound social shifts and a lot of consternation from Victorian moralists who thought factory work would corrupt their souls. You move to the next loom. A smash has occurred. The shuttle didn't make it all the way across before the reed beat forward, smashing the shuttle into the warped threads and snapping hundreds of them. It is a disaster. You have to tie each microscopic thread back together with a weaver's knot, a knot so small it can pass through the heddle eye without catching. Your fingers are bleeding from the raw cotton, but you tie the knots in seconds. The air is hot tropical, in fact. The shed is kept at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 degrees Celsius, and 80% humidity. Why? Because dry cotton snaps. Wet cotton is strong. Steam jets hiss from the ceiling, keeping the air thick and moist. You are sweating through your dress or shirt. Mold grows in the corners. Your lungs are filling with byssinosis, brown lung disease from the cotton dust. Historians still argue vigorously about the standard of living debate during this period. Did the Industrial Revolution improve the lives of these workers? The optimists point to higher wages compared to farm labor and the eventual drop in the price of goods. Clothing became cheap. The pessimists point to the height of the workers, which actually dropped during the early 19th century due to malnutrition and stress, the child labor, and the horrific conditions. You, standing in the deafening roar, might side with the pessimists today. But there is a hypnotic beauty to the terror. The sheer volume of cloth being produced is staggering. A single shed like this can produce enough fabric in a week to wrap a small city. You are part of the workshop of the world. The calico you are weaving will be sold in India, Africa, and the Americas. You are at the center of a global web of trade, powered by coal and managed by the relentless clock. Suddenly, a scream cuts through the mechanical roar. It's different from the machine noise. A girl's hair has been caught. She leaned too close to a spinning drive shaft. The leather belt has grabbed her apron or her braid. The tackler, the mechanic, runs to disengage the main drive. The looms slowly shudder to a halt. The silence that follows is more terrifying than the noise. It rings in your ears. You don't look. You can't look. You turn back to your loom. You have a quota. The engine is firing up again. Whir. The belts slap. The roar returns, swallowing the scream, swallowing the fear, swallowing everything. The shuttle must fly. The kiss must be given. The cloth must be made. You wipe the cotton dust from your eyelashes. You check the cop. It's almost empty. You lean in, your lips parting to meet the cold steel tip of the shuttle once again. It tastes of oil and iron. You suck the thread through, and the machine screams its approval. The deafening roar of the steam-powered weaving shed fades, replaced by a silence so profound it hums. The air is no longer thick with cotton dust or the damp, earthy smell of wool. It is cool, dry, and smells sharply of ozone, formaldehyde, and burning rubber. You are standing in a pristine laboratory in Wilmington, Delaware. The year is 1935, or perhaps early 1938. You are wearing a white coat, and you are about to kill the silkworm. You are looking at a glass beaker. Inside is a thick, amber-colored sludge. It looks like molasses, but it is actually a superpolymer made from the most mundane ingredients imaginable: coal, air, and water. You take a glass rod and dip it into the goo. You pull it out. A thin, fragile thread trails after the rod, like hot mozzarella cheese. Now, here is the magic. You grab that fragile thread with tweezers and you pull. In the textile world, pulling usually breaks things. Wool snaps, cotton tears. But this stretches. It elongates to 4 times its original length. And as it stretches, something miraculous happens at the molecular level. The chaotic tangle of long chain molecules suddenly snaps into alignment. They form a crystalline structure. The thread goes from being a weak, gooey strand to a fiber that is stronger than steel by weight. You have just performed cold drawing. You have invented nylon. You are standing at the epicenter of the plastic age. For 10,000 years, humans have only been able to weave what nature provided: hair from an animal or fiber from a plant. You were limited by the length of the sheep's fleece or the height of the flax stalk, but now you are a god. You can spin a fiber as long as you want, as strong as you want, and crucially, as cheap as you want. You look at the fiber. It is shiny. It is smooth. It looks exactly like silk. But silk is expensive, and the supply chain is currently controlled by an increasingly hostile Japanese empire. The West needs a substitute. You have just cooked one up in a test tube. Here is a mainstream historical fact. When DuPont finally released nylon stockings to the public on May 15, 1940, a date known as N-Day, it sparked literal riots. We aren't talking about a polite pew. We are talking about 4 million pairs selling out in hours. In New York City alone, 780,000 pairs vanished. Women fought in the aisles of department stores. They were desperate. Why? Because silk stockings snagged, sagged, and cost a fortune. Nylon was marketed as indestructible, a lie, but a good one, and sheer as a cobweb. It was the iPhone release of the 1940s. But you, the chemist, know the dark side of this miracle. To make this fiber, you need massive chemical plants. You need high pressure. You need heat. And you need to figure out how to weave it. Nylon is slippery. It doesn't have the microscopic scales of wool or the twist of cotton. If you put it on a traditional loom, the threads just slide apart. You have to invent new sizing agents, glues, just to get it to hold still long enough to be woven. And then the world changes again. The war comes. Almost overnight, the nylon you just invented is drafted. The government seizes every ounce of production. The stockings disappear from the shelves. Why? Because nylon is needed for parachutes. It is needed for B-29 tire cords. It is needed for glider tow ropes. The miracle fiber goes to war. This brings us to a quirky tidbit: the liquid stocking. During World War II, when nylons were impossible to find, women didn't just go bare-legged. That would have been scandalous. Instead, they bought bottles of leg makeup, essentially beige paint, and applied it to their legs to simulate the look of stockings. But the illusion wasn't complete without the seam. In the 1940s, stockings were woven flat and sewn up the back, leaving a distinct dark line. So, women would use an eyebrow pencil to draw a fake seam down the back of their calves. Some even hired seam artists to do it for them professionally. It was a simulation of a simulation. You watch the parachutes bloom over Normandy. They are made of your fiber. They are rot-proof. They don't mildew in the jungle like silk. They are lighter and stronger. You have saved thousands of lives with this plastic thread. But back in the lab, a new debate is starting. It is the planned obsolescence conspiracy. Historians and economists still argue about the durability of early nylon. Legend has it that the first batches of nylon stockings were too good. They never ran, never tore. DuPont realized that if they sold a pair that lasted forever, they would go out of business. So the story goes, they instructed the chemists to weaken the fiber, to make it more brittle, to ensure that it would ladder eventually. Is this true? Or is it just that as they made the stockings sheerer, thinner, to meet fashion trends, they naturally became more fragile? The truth is likely a mix of physics and capitalism. 15 denier nylon is simply not as tough as 40 denier, but it looks sexier, so the durability was sacrificed for the aesthetic. You look at your creation under a microscope. It is a perfect, smooth cylinder. It has no flaws. It is the platonically ideal thread, but it has a tactile quality that is different. It feels cold to the touch. It doesn't breathe. If you sweat in a nylon shirt, you smell like a locker room in 10 minutes. It is a barrier, not a filter. The war ends, the stockings return, and nylon riots happen again. But now, you are weaving other things. You are weaving carpets. You are weaving toothbrushes. You are weaving artificial arteries for heart surgery. You have broken the link with the land. You no longer need a sheep. You no longer need a flax field. You just need a pipeline of oil and a chemical plant. The textile industry, which began in a muddy field, has moved into a sterile, windowless factory. You pick up a pair of sheer stockings. They are softer than silk, cheaper than cotton, and they gleam with a synthetic luster. You stretch them. They snap back. Elasticity is the new currency. You have created a world where clothing moves with the body, where stretch is a standard feature, not a luxury. But as you wash your hands with harsh industrial soap to get the chemical smell off, you notice something. The waste from your lab, where does it go? The little bits of fiber that wash down the drain, they don't rot. They don't break down like the nettles in the cave. They will persist. You have created a material that is immortal. Future archaeologists won't find ghost looms of rotted wood. They will find layers of indecipherable plastic dust. You step out of the lab. The sun is setting over the chemical plant's cooling towers. The air smells of progress. You have clothed the world in molecules that didn't exist 10 years ago. You have democratized luxury. But you have also wrapped the planet in a layer of permanent, non-biodegradable skin. The age of nature is over. The age of the polymer has begun. The sterile scent of the chemical lab fades, replaced by a wall of sound that is cleaner, sharper, and infinitely faster than the clattering roar of the 19th century mill. You are standing on the floor of a modern weaving facility, perhaps in China, India, or Italy. The year is now. The lighting is harsh, clinical fluorescent. The floor is polished concrete, spotless enough to eat off of. You look at the machine in front of you. It is sleek, encased in cream-colored metal guards and safety glass. It looks less like a loom and more like a large office photocopier. You wait for the shuttle to fly. You wait for that familiar thwack of wood on leather. You wait for the kiss of the thread. You will be waiting a long time. The shuttle is dead. In its place is nothing, or rather air. You are witnessing the air-jet loom. It is the F-15 fighter jet of the textile world. It doesn't throw a projectile. It shoots a bullet of air. Here's how it works. On one side of the loom, a main nozzle blasts a puff of highly compressed air. This puff carries the tip of the weft thread into the shed, the gap between the warp threads. But air resistance is a problem. The thread would lose momentum halfway across. So across the width of the fabric, a series of tiny relay nozzles pop up from the raceboard like synchronized. Swimmers. Feft. 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 They fire in a precise sequence, handing off the thread from one jet of air to the next, carrying it across the loom on a cushion of wind. It happens so fast your brain cannot process it. On a hand loom, you might throw the shuttle 20 times a minute. On a steam power loom, maybe 150 times. On this machine, you are looking at 1,000 to 1,200 picks per minute. That is 20 rows of weaving every single second. If you blink, you miss 3 inches of fabric being made. The machine is blurring. The reed, the comb that beats the cloth, is vibrating so fast it looks solid, like a hummingbird's wing. You lean in closer carefully, behind the safety sensor that will kill the power if you get too close. You try to track the thread. You can't. It's just a shimmer. The only evidence that weaving is happening is the fabric rolling effortlessly onto the beam at a speed that seems physically impossible. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The invention of shuttleless weaving, which includes air jets, water jets, and rapiers in the mid-20th century, was the final nail in the coffin for the traditional textile town. A single air-jet loom can produce as much cloth in an hour as a hand weaver could in a month. This exponential leap in speed collapsed the price of fabric to near zero. It is the reason you can buy a t-shirt for $5. It turned clothing from a durable asset into a disposable commodity. But there is a cost to this speed. Energy. You might think blowing air is cheap. It's not. Compressing air to the pressure required, often 6 to 8 bars, is incredibly energy intensive. A weaving shed with 500 air-jet looms is essentially a massive pneumatic power plant. The electricity bill is astronomical. The air compressors are often housed in a separate building because they are so loud and hot. You are weaving with electricity, converted into wind, converted into cloth. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. Because there is no shuttle to carry the thread back across the loom, the thread has to be cut after every single insertion. On a shuttle loom, the thread loops back, creating a neat, closed edge called a selvage, self-edge. On an air-jet loom, the thread is snipped, leaving a raw, fringed edge that looks like a bad haircut. To keep the cloth from unraveling, the machine has to use a lino device, a special mechanism that twists the last few warp threads to lock the weft in place, or a tuck-in needle that grabs the loose end and jams it back into the cloth. If you look at the seam of your cheap jeans and see a serged, overlocked edge instead of a neat woven strip, you are looking at the signature of the airjet. The noise is different here too. It isn't a rhythmic clack-clack. It is a continuous, high-frequency hiss-roar. It sounds like a jet engine idling. It is a white noise that drills into your skull. You are wearing heavy-duty ear defenders, but you can still feel the vibration in the soles of your feet. Historians and fashion purists still argue about the soul of this cloth. Is it inferior? Structurally, no. In fact, it is more uniform than anything a human could produce. But enthusiasts of raw denim will pay hundreds of dollars for jeans woven on old, rattling shuttle looms, often salvaged from closed American mills and shipped to Japan. Why? Because the shuttle loom chatters. It vibrates. It creates tiny imperfections, slubs, and nep that give the fabric character. The air-jet loom is too perfect. It produces a sterile grid. It has no personality. You watch the weft accumulator on the side of the machine. It's a drum where the thread is pre-wound before being blasted across. It spins frantically. The machine is voracious. It consumes yarn faster than the eye can follow. And you? You are not a weaver. You are a technician. You don't touch the thread. You don't kiss the shuttle. You watch a touchscreen display. Red light. The loom stops instantly. A sensor has detected a mispick. The airjet failed to carry the thread all the way across. Maybe a piece of lint blocked a nozzle. The machine waits for you. You walk over. You don't use a hook or a knife. You press a button. A blast of air clears the fault. The machine rethreads itself pneumatically. You press start. The roar resumes. You are superfluous. The machine knows when it has failed. It knows how to fix itself, mostly. You are just there to change the giant beams of yarn when they run out, which happens every few hours because of the speed. You look around the factory floor. It is vast. There are hundreds of these machines, but only a handful of people. The human element has been engineered out. The weaver, that skilled artisan who knew the tension of the wool, the smell of the indigo, the rhythm of the treadle, has been replaced by a sensor and a solenoid. You walk to the end of the aisle. The finished cloth is rolling up on a massive batcher. It is hundreds of yards long. It is flawless. It is cheap. It is the fabric of your life, your sheets, your curtains, your clothes. But as you touch the cool, smooth surface of the polyester cotton blend, you feel a strange emptiness. There is no struggle here. No tenterhooks. No kissing, no pulling the lash. There is just efficiency. The struggle of the last 20,000 years, the struggle to twist, to stretch, to cover our nakedness has been solved. We have won the war against the elements. But standing in this deafening wind tunnel of a factory, you wonder if we lost the thread somewhere along the way. The air jets fire again. Feft, feft, feft. Another inch of history is woven, invisible and untouched by human hands. The deafening, pneumatic scream of the airjet loom cuts out. The fluorescent lights flicker and die. In the sudden silence, you blink, adjusting your eyes to a softer, warmer illumination. You are standing in a sunlit room with high ceilings and wooden floors. Dust motes dance in the golden beams streaming through the window. The smell of ozone and chemical size is gone, replaced by the scent of cedar, lanolin, and perhaps a cup of herbal tea steaming on a nearby table. You are back where you started, but you are not in a cave. You are in a studio. You sit down on a wooden bench. It is polished smooth by years of use. In front of you is a floor loom, a countermarch, or a jack loom. It is made of maple or cherry wood. It creaks softly as you shift your weight. It is a machine, yes, but it is a machine that breathes. You are witnessing the hand loom revival. You kick off your shoes. You place your bare feet on the treadles, the wooden pedals underneath the loom. You press one down. Creak whoosh. The harness lifts. The shed opens. It is a quiet, satisfying mechanical action. You pick up a boat shuttle, a beautiful, curved piece of wood that fits perfectly in your palm. You throw it through the shed. It slides across the race with a gentle shee. You catch it on the other side. You pull the beater toward you. Thump, press, throw, beat, release. The rhythm is slow. It is human. It matches your heartbeat, not the frequency of the electrical grid. You are weaving at a speed of maybe 40 picks per minute. The airjet loom could do this in 2 seconds. But you don't care about efficiency. You care about the feeling. You are weaving a scarf, or perhaps a blanket. The yarn in your hands is hand-dyed wool, full of subtle variegations in color imperfections that the industrial machines would have rejected as faults, but which you cherish as character. You are engaging in a conversation with the material. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The revival of hand weaving as an art form, rather than a necessity, began in earnest with the arts and crafts movement of the late 19th century, led by William Morris. He argued that industrialization had stripped the soul out of work, and that returning to handcraft was essential for human dignity. This philosophy was later picked up by the Bauhaus school in Germany, where weavers like Annie Albers transformed textiles from women's craft into high modernist art. You are sitting at a loom that is the spiritual grandchild of that rebellion against the machine. As you weave, you notice a mistake, a skipped thread, a float. On the airjet loom, this would have triggered a red light and a pneumatic blast. Here, you just stop. You sigh. You unweave, unweaving, or tinking. Knit backwards, pulling the weft out row by row until you fix the error. It is frustrating, but it is also a lesson. You are allowed to fix things. You are allowed to be imperfect. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. In the world of hand weaving, there is a persistent myth, often attributed to Navajo or Persian weavers, though its origins are debated, that you should always leave a spirit line or a deliberate mistake in the weaving. The idea is that a perfect object traps the spirit of the creator, and the mistake is a door for the soul to escape, whether it's spiritual truth or just a convenient excuse for a typo in the pattern. It embraces the humanity of the flaw. You change colors. You are winding a new bobbin. The winder makes a rhythmic work-lick. It is a soothing, domestic sound. You are making decisions with every shot of the shuttle. Should I add a stripe here? Should I change the texture? The loom is not a tyrant. It is a piano, and you are improvising jazz. Historians and sociologists still argue about the elitism of this return to craft. Is slow cloth, the movement to weave, knit, and sew your own clothes, a radical act of anti-consumerism? Or is it a luxury hobby for those with the time and money to opt out of the fast fashion system? You are weaving a scarf that might cost $20 in materials, but represents $500 in labor hours. Economically, it makes no sense. But psychologically, it is priceless. You pause to look out the window. The world outside is rushing by. Cars, internet cables, supply chains. But inside the studio, time has pooled and slowed. You are connecting with the muscle memory of the 200 previous generations of weavers. The motion of your arm throwing the shuttle is the same motion the Egyptian weaver used in the New Kingdom. The pressure of your foot on the treadle is the same as the medieval weaver in the guild hall. You are engaging in textile meditation. The repetition quiets the monkey mind. Left foot, right hand, beat. Right foot, left hand, beat. It is a mantra without words. You look at the cloth growing on the beam. It is a double weave or a summer and winter pattern. It has depth. It has warmth. It has the smell of the maker. When you gift this to someone, you are not just giving them a piece of fabric. You are giving them hours of your life, woven into a grid. The sun begins to set, casting long golden rectangles across the floor. The dust motes slow down. You finish the last row. You cut the yarn. You release the tension on the loom. The warp threads relax. The wood groans softly, settling for the night. You stand up. Your back is stiff. Some things never change, but your mind is clear. You run your hand over the finished web. It is rough, textured, real. It is the antithesis of the slick, cold nylon. It is a return to the messy, organic, beautiful reality of the fiber. You have come full circle. From the nettle twisted on the thigh, to the polymer extruded from a jet, and back to the wooden shuttle in the hand. The technology changes, but the urge remains the same. To take the chaos of the world, the loose strands, the tangled fibers, and weave them into order. To make a whole cloth out of the fragments. You cover the loom with a sheet to protect it from the dust. It looks like a sleeping animal in the twilight. You turn off the lamp. You walk out of the studio, closing the door on the silent machinery. The weaving is done for today. The pattern is set, and you are finally truly warm. Word count, 10:45. Awaiting continue wind down. The studio door clicks shut, sealing the quiet inside. The sun has fully set now, leaving the world wrapped in a blanket of soft indigo twilight, a color that reminds you of the deep-dive vats of history. The frantic clicking of the jacquard cards, the deafening roar of the power looms, and the hiss of the air jets have all faded into the distance. They are just echoes now, absorbed by the long tapestry of time. You are no longer a worker in the mill, a chemist in the lab, or a revolutionary in the fog. You are simply here. You are sitting in a comfortable chair, the weight of the day lifting off your shoulders like a heavy woolen cloak being unclasped. Imagine the threads that connect you to everything. The cotton in your sheets, the wool in your blanket, the fibers that hold your world together. They are not just materials. They are stories. They are the millions of hands twisting, spinning, dyeing, and weaving that have worked for thousands of years to keep you warm and safe. Let that feeling of connection wrap around you. It is a safety net, a web of protection woven just for you. The tension is released. The warp is slack. There is no more pulling, no more straining, no more counting. Feel the rhythm of your own breathing slow down. In and out. It is the oldest rhythm of all, the original rise and fall of the loom. In and out. The shuttle is at rest. The work is finished. The pattern is complete, and it is beautiful. Let the darkness be a comfort, a soft velvet curtain drawn against the noise of the outside world. You are safe in the weave. You are part of the fabric. Close your eyes. Let the final thread slip through your fingers. Drift into the quiet, warm space between the threads.